In a free market society or in a Western society, it's free market players who decide what to do with that surplus value for the most part. But like in a state capitalist society, it's the state that decides what to do with the surplus value. Now, I'll give you the definition of what state capitalist is, because like most people that say that have absolutely no idea what it is. They're just like, oh yeah, it's state capitalist because the state runs something that works within a capitalist framework, and so it's state capitalist. And it's just like, well, yes, that is one interpretation of it, and you can use that. But like, by that definition, and as I was saying before, most countries would be state capitalist because they have the state interfering in the market to a certain extent and planning things and subsidizing certain industries. Like, the amount of subsidies that come from the US government into the agricultural sector in the US, you would basically have to make the argument that they're state capitalist if it was just, the state gets involved in kind of, the market, and like delivering kind of goods to the market, etc., etc., etc. But like, why the Chinese were state capitalist is because they didn't abolish the wage labor to capital relation. So most of the Chinese industrial working class and the agricultural class were wage workers, and a capitalist system, or capitalism, or capital as a mode of production, is defined by the development of an exchange society. So having a system of exchange and commerce develops to a certain point where people have to exchange in order to survive. So they produce products, goods, services, what have you, that are alienated from themselves. So they're not producing for themselves and then selling the extra stuff or whatever is superfluous to their own needs. They aren't producing anything for themselves at all. They're in a system of exchange that is so highly developed that they exchange their labor and then they get things back from the exchange process in order to survive. Now, wage labor, that system of wage labor, is what gave birth to capitalism, or facilitated capitalism, or people to make capital, and then that developed into industrial capital. And so the existence of wage laborers in China, whether they are controlled by capital, which is like, capitalists, or whether that's controlled by the state and they decide how to spend capital and they decide where they're going to accumulate surplus value, how they're going to push people into certain industries to increase surplus labor in that industry for, social wealth production. And so it's not going to maybe a capitalist class, it's going to the central party or something, and they decide like what to do with the fruits of everybody's accumulated surplus labor and their accumulated surplus value. They're still controlling surplus value. And so like the only difference is that like in a free market society or in a Western society, that surplus value is basically, it's free market players to decide what to do with that surplus value for the most part. But like in a state capitalist society, it's the state that decides what to do with the surplus value and the surplus labor that comes out of the wage labor system. And so that's why they are state capitalists. And I think that's an important thing to grasp for us as revolutionaries, for us as anti-capitalists, that if you really want to be anti-capitalist, if you really want to revolutionize the mode of production, not just society, but the mode of production itself, you have to do something that undermines the wage labor system, that undermines a system that is predicated on exploiting labor and like paying it for its subsistence, so paying it just enough for it to survive or for it to live comfortably, however you want to call it, and then taking all of the surplus that it produces, all that surplus value that it creates from working additional hours beyond its own needs. You'd have to undermine that relationship somehow. That's how you would attack the mode of production, which is capitalism. That's how you would be anti-capitalist.
If China is to build a modern economy, she must train skilled technicians in large numbers. And this she is desperately trying to do. In 1952, the Institute of Iron and Steel in Peking enrolled 400 students. In 1965, there were almost 6,000.
Go train your labor force, see? You've got
It
to
is
train
here
your labor
that
force.
future metallurgists and chemical technicians are being trained.
Capital relies on labor. Like, I was having a discussion with someone, like I guess a right-wing person in the comments section recently, and they were just like, capitalism, capitalists, they do all the stuff, they take all the risks, they do all the hard work kind of stuff. And like, they're like, and if it wasn't for capitalists, then you wouldn't have labor. And I was like, well, no, actually, it's actually the other way around. Capital exists because of wage labor. Wage labor existed before capitalism did. Like, people did get paid for their work. Not everyone worked like that. It was a small margin of society that worked off labor, and like the system wasn't built around wage labor. But like, wage labor became more and more increased and more at the disposal of capitalists, and then that system developed that way. And so like, the Chinese, they understood this. They were studying Marx. They were studying like his critique of capitalism, or his understanding of capital. And so they were like, okay, not only do we have to build railways and like invest heavily in producing our own industrial sector, producing massive warehouses and machinery, but we have to ensure the education of our labor force. And so we need engineers, we need scientists, we need technicians. This is where planning meets capital. And if you can do state capitalism very well, and you can direct your labor forces and stuff like that, like, you can be extremely efficient at what you decide to focus on. Like, obviously there are drawbacks from that. Like, you can be too focused on efficiency and forget obviously about humanity. You can forget about like what other consequences might happen as a result of that, like the longevity of your own population. But planning the capitalist mode is a force to be reckoned with, as we are seeing now already. Capital just wouldn't work if it didn't require workers to offer their labor for a wage in order to subsist. Yes, that is as Marx would call it, is a presupposition of the capitalist mode of production, or like the capitalist system. The presupposition of it is wage labor. And so like, wage labor is presupposed, so it has to exist in order to have a capitalist exchange society working. It's an important understanding to have. Like, capital presupposes labor. It has to be in existence for capital to exist. I'm not saying they it's not a symbiotic relationship at some point, but like, if wage laborers didn't exist, capitalism would never have developed out of feudalism as the way we saw it in Europe.
Remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.
I am on Patreon. Please follow the link in the description and sign up for free. We are trying to build a revolutionary community over there. So go become a member for free and join the conversation. If you can contribute financially, that would help a lot towards making this content.